The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi there, and you're in the right place for Best Practices Hearing Health, moderated by Gary Barg, founder and editor-in-chief of today's Caregiver magazine and caregiver.com, and featured speaker Jim Rollins of Caption Call. I'm Lori Dearman, senior webinar producer with WebAttract, and I'll be one of your moderators for today's session. And in just a moment, we'll be introducing our featured speaker, as today's webinar is about hearing from him as he shares how to recognize and treat hearing loss, how to overcome resistance to discussing the issue, and some possible solutions. You'll also have an opportunity to have your questions answered at the end of the presentation during the Ask the Expert panel session with our speaker today. Now, we've invited you with over 230 professional and family caregivers from 34 states and provinces, all interested in the topic of hearing health and options that are available to help empower those with hearing loss. Let's go ahead and get started today with a quick poll question for all of you. We'd like to hear from you. And coming up on your screen, what challenges are you having in getting your loved one or client to take action regarding his or her hearing loss? So are they in denial about their hearing loss? Perhaps not even willing to entertain a conversation? Not convinced that there are adequate solutions available? They feel that solutions are too expensive, or maybe they've had a bad experience. Go ahead and tell us what you're experiencing. And once we get votes from most of our audience, we'll be sharing all of that with all of you. And keeping in mind, again, I do see some questions coming in already. That's fabulous. Keep them coming. We'll queue those up for the end of the presentation today. All right, folks, let's go ahead and take a look. I'm going to close up that poll. So if you haven't voted, go ahead and do so right now. And let's see. Looks like we have about 44% indicating that they're in denial about their hearing loss, 12% not willing to even entertain a conversation, 35% not convinced that there are adequate solutions available. Looks like the front runner here, 85% feeling that the solutions are too expensive, and about 18% having had a bad experience. So thank you very much for that insight. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring on Gary Barg. Gary Barg is founder and editor-in-chief, again, of today's Caregiver magazine and caregiver.com. And Gary is going to be our main moderator for today's webinar. Gary, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Lori. Thanks for introducing me, and I'm very much looking forward to today's webinar. We know for a fact that hearing health is a great challenge to family and professional caregivers. I want to welcome everybody to the Best Practices Hearing Health webinar presented by today's Caregiver magazine and caregiver.com. This complimentary webinar is designed to help professional and family caregivers learn to best deal with your clients and your loved ones' hearing loss. It'll be led by Jim Rollins, BCHIS, who's a board-certified hearing health expert for over 12 years, who has held leading positions with manufacturers including Sonic Innovations, Siemens Hearing Instruments, and Belltone Electronics. Jim has owned and operated 5 Belltone hearing aid clinics and is now assisting the hearing impaired through Caption Call as their Director of National Accounts. Jim.
Gary, thank you for that introduction. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here to talk about hearing loss and the solutions and the opportunities that we have to educate those that we take care of. So again, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for this opportunity. I wanted to start off by discussing somebody that I find very inspiring, and that is Helen Keller. Helen Keller, obviously, I think most of us understand her challenges in life as it pertained to her complete loss of hearing as well as her loss of her sight. But something interesting that she did say was this quote: "When you lose your eyesight, you lose contact with things. But when you lose your hearing, you lose contact with people." And Ms. Keller's words ring true to this day. I feel like this is something that is absolutely profound as we talk about hearing loss and we begin to understand. We see that the symptoms are not only communicative, but they're also social, and they have an effect on us and our families and everybody that we meet. The effects are wide-reaching. We need to understand the effects of hearing loss and who it touches, and not just the physical symptoms, but the mental and the relational and the safety issues that we face. We tend to know and understand that in the mental health aspect, some of the symptoms of hearing loss are frustration, depression. Some of those can lead into isolation. It's a common fact that dementia and Alzheimer's are often misdiagnosed and can be rooted, and the diagnosis can be misdiagnosed as hearing loss. And hearing loss, and understanding that hearing loss can be mistaken for those types of challenges is a big surprise to a lot of people. Go ahead, Gary.
No, I'm sorry. It just this is very exciting, because I know that Johns Hopkins had a report recently that said hearing impaired adults experience cognitive decline of 30-40% faster than those with normal hearing. So I'm really glad to hear you, as an expert in the field, saying that you're actually seeing this. So it's another reason that we need to pay attention to hearing loss for our loved ones. But I have to say, at our New Haven Fearless Caregiver conference this year, or last year, there was an audiologist in the audience who raised her hand and told the audience that something that I had never heard before, and that's that hearing health leads to more falls in seniors.
Absolutely. Hearing loss comes with many challenges, and we'll talk about a lot of the symptoms. But one of those symptoms that come from hearing loss is issues with balance. Our ears, especially our inner ears, play a tremendous role in keeping our bodies balanced. And when one or both of those inner ears face decay or challenges due to hearing loss, we begin to lose our balance. And even if it's just minor, we can experience that lack of balance, and it's just enough to throw us off, just enough where we can experience a fall. And we all know how tragic those falls can be.
Oh,
but yeah, absolutely. So leads right into this third bullet point here, and safety. Not only with our balance and our physical safety, but understanding the world around us and keeping ourselves safe. Not being able to hear sirens or smoke alarms or the telephone ringing even. Understanding that those just those things that we take for granted in life are not something that people with hearing loss always experience or understand is happening around them. So who has hearing loss? The numbers are staggering. Approximately 36 million Americans, about 11% of the American population, are hearing impaired. And 1 out of every 3 people over the age of 65, or 33% of Americans over the age of 65, have a hearing disorder. Now this next statistic is the one that gets me. It is the 3rd most prevalent chronic condition behind arthritis and hypertension. This is a widespread, you could almost call it an epidemic. It is impacting all of us. You think about people in your family, your circle of friends, your neighborhood, your social groups, your church groups. It affects all of us. And there are ways to combat it, and that's what we'll talk about today. But there's another issue, and that's the issue of denial. A lot of us that know people that have hearing loss, maybe we ourselves experience hearing loss, there is a sense of denial. It is not something that is easy to admit to. I like these images. I think they're a good example or good depictions of how people may be in denial, particularly the individual with his head in the sand. I also look at the man there in the middle. He doesn't look like a very happy individual. He looks a little angry. Kind of reminds me of a story about my dad. My dad and I get along great. My family and I, we go over to he and my mother's home every couple Sundays for dinner. And the interesting thing is, I can get out of the car and begin my walk up to the front door, and the television is so loud that I can hear it as I'm walking up to the front door. And I always say, Dad, maybe it's time to get things looked at. The TV's too loud. I can't even hear myself. And of course, that makes my dad angry. A lot of it's in the way that I say it, but it's also not something that he wants to admit. He doesn't feel like he's at that point in his life yet. People that suspect they may have a hearing loss, 75% or 3 out of 4 people wait many years before seeking any kind of treatment. People that do confirm that they have a hearing loss, and again, 75% wait many years before seeking solutions. The average time an individual waits before treating a diagnosed hearing loss is 7 years. And that's just too long. You wouldn't wait 7 hours if you sprained your ankle before you went to a doctor. But 7 years before any treatment is sought out for hearing loss. So why do people delay? Why do people not necessarily want treatment? Well, there's a negative stigma surrounding hearing loss, and I think that's because there's just a lack of information out there in the general public about what causes it, where it comes from, why we have it, and how it affects people. A lot of people just fear that hearing aids will make them look old, and naturally, we work very hard in America to slow down that aging process. People don't believe that the treatment will help or that there aren't appropriate or adequate solutions available. They don't know where to start. How do I get a hearing aid? Where do I get a hearing aid? Is it something my doctor gives me? Where do I go? Is it something I can buy off the shelf at Walmart? I don't know. How do I get one? The other thing is hearing loss can also happen very gradually. It can take time before the actual individual with hearing loss recognizes that they have a hearing problem. Another issue is caregivers can enable a cycle of dependency or delayed treatment for individuals. Maybe they make life a lot easier, and of course, people with big hearts usually do that, but it's not necessarily helping by creating a cycle of dependency for people that have hearing loss. And we'll talk a little bit more about that particular cycle. So how do we get people to take action? We can start to talk about it. We can start to discuss.
Hey Jim, can I jump in again?
Of course.
I'm listening to this and I'm taking notes. What role does shame play of our loved ones, of ourselves? I find it so funny. People easily accept glasses and dentures and even canes, but heaven help us if we have to talk to our loved ones about, or clients about, needing a hearing aid. How do we address that?
That's a very good question. And I think shame plays a factor on both sides of the conversation, for the individual with hearing loss and the individual that needs to bring the subject up, or the caregiver or a loved one or a family member. I think because of that negative stigma, we feel shame when we go to talk to a loved one or a client about hearing loss or hearing aids. We don't want to be the one to bring up the bad news, so we feel a certain level of shame. An individual also might delay seeking treatment because they're ashamed that I don't hear as well as I used to. I don't participate. I'm socially isolated. I don't know if I want to do something about this because it's going to be hard work. And those tend to be some of the issues that people face as it pertains to feeling shame or ashamed about the issue.
Cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It's a big answer. I appreciate that.
No problem. And again, convincing people is really the first step, and it's probably the hardest step that we take as loved ones or caregivers. So how do we talk to our loved ones about hearing loss? Well, there are some little tips, little ways to help. The way that I handle it with my dad, not the right way. It's very easy to say, you just don't hear me, or why are you doing that? Very pointed questions that can make our loved ones feel ashamed. Great way to start a conversation is, hey, I've noticed that you might have misunderstood me, or I've noticed that you maybe didn't understand the grandkids, or you missed out on this conversation. Are you okay? How are you feeling? Those are some great questions to ask, and it can open the door to allow the individual with hearing loss to open up a little bit. Demonstrating real examples, just like I mentioned. If you can demonstrate how somebody has misheard or misinterpreted because of some. I mean, you are going to know, that the individuals have a hearing loss usually before they do. So guiding the conversation is very important. But using some of the real world examples that you've experienced together is a very, very precise way of bringing these issues up. It's a natural part of aging. We can bring that up too. I mean, there are so many things that we deal with as we age. Hearing loss is a big one. And the more we understand that it's just a part of the aging process, maybe the more apt we are to do something about it. Allowing people to understand that there are some very famous people that have dealt with hearing loss in very high profile positions. President Reagan dealt with hearing loss while he was the president of the United States in the White House. I happen to know one of the individuals that fit President Reagan with hearing aids while he was in the White House, and have heard some very, very interesting stories about his challenges and how he overcame them. And just a phenomenal example. Bill Clinton, President Clinton, another president, many famous actors and actresses, Barbara Streisand, just to name one. But bringing those people up can help as well. But Ronald Reagan, to me, is a phenomenal example of an individual who overcame the challenge and did something about it. It brings us to how we convince somebody to take action. Talking about it is one thing. Taking the next step is another. We want to make sure that they're the priority. We want to make sure that our loved one or the individual with hearing loss and their safety and their well-being is the priority. We want to help them be self-reliant. We want to help them be as self-reliant as they can be. There is technology available to us that has just phenomenally advanced the hearing aid industry just in the last few years. I mean, I've seen the hearing aid industry change, almost reinvent itself 2 or 3 times in the last 12 years, and the leaps are amazing in terms of how the industry has changed for the better. And of course, this one really goes without saying, but being patient and loving and not pushy. These things can take time, hopefully not 7 years, but these things can really take a lot of time to discuss. And then we want to help where we can. We want to help them as they begin to take action. Stopping the cycle of enabling hearing loss is something that is currently under the microscope quite a bit. So how do we do it? What are ways that we enable hearing loss?
Jim, I think we may have lost you there. Can you hear me? Gary, you're still with us, right?
I am still with you. Actually, these are things that we hear at the Fearless Caregiver Conferences a lot. That same New Haven event, it was amazing that someone stood up and said, well, I just don't want to face my mom with this issue. So what I'm going to do is I've ignored it. And she can, see flashing lights. And the audiologist said, what's your problem? She says, I can't get her to pay attention. And so the audiologist said, sometimes you have to, just like Jim said, stop enabling. Sometimes you have to face them and say, okay, guy, this is something we have to face to help me help you, to help you live well at home, live in the community. And I'll tell you what, the other thing is, when Jim says involve the whole family in your efforts to convince them, that's what we talked about over Christmas. We have something we call a board of directors, the program where if you're the CEO of Caring for My Loved One, Inc., and then your family caregivers who come in every once in a while, may not come in too often, may not be great help, you still consider them your board of directors. And I always say the hearing health is the best entry portal, because your loved ones who live out of the area, okay, they may absolutely not know mom can't drive, she's forgetting, how to do things, that how maybe poorly her health is becoming. But they and the grandkids sure as heck know that mom can't hear them on the phone anymore, which will either one of two things. It makes your loved one, I say mom, I could be anyone, I apologize, but it makes your loved one with their hearing health be mad at everybody. It makes them not connect to their grandchildren because the kids don't want to talk to someone who can't hear them. And it allows, probably a lot of stress and fracture in the family between your loved one and the long distance caregivers, your long distance family members. That's not necessary. So if you create a board of directors program, you take your loved ones aside and say, okay, guys, I really need your help here because you may not know everything that's going on with mom because I'm living with her, or my loved one, obviously, because I'm living with them, but you sure as heck know that hearing is an issue. So what can we do? Let's get the grandkids involved. A senior loved one thinks about nothing more than the fact that they want to be involved with the grandkids. And if a grandkid is sitting on your mother or grandfather's uncle's lap and says, please, can we go to the audiologist because I want to communicate, I want to tell you how my day is, makes a big difference. Another thing that, hey, Jim.
I think those are, I hear you talking about grandkids, and I think that's always the way to somebody's heart. I've got 3 boys of my own, and I know that my parents and my grandparents will probably do something that my kids ask before they would do anything that I asked them to do. And so I think grandkids are always the way to somebody's heart. And in talking about, I also heard you mentioning going to an audiologist or a caregiver or somebody in the hearing healthcare profession. One thing that I think is phenomenal about this particular industry is you can find individuals who offer free hearing exams to anybody. Usually they're hearing instrument specialists, and you can look up in the phone book, or you can call around and you can ask about free hearing tests. And free hearing tests are readily available in almost every area in the United States. And you can always go and get your hearing tests, and if you don't necessarily click with the individual that gave you the hearing test, you can go to somebody else. There's no pressure. There's no pressure to buy. There's no pressure to act right then. Make a decision when you're comfortable. That's going to be a big part of moving forward with hearing help. Get an appointment. That's the first step. Just get an appointment and then go from there. People will get help for different reasons. There are many reasons why people don't get help. There are just as many reasons why people do get help. But usually it's that encouragement from family members, loved ones, grandkids that really turn the tide. And sometimes hearing loss gets so bad that you just can't function anymore, and it becomes too difficult to engage in everyday life. And once that isolation and withdrawal starts to take effect, then it's time to act. You're past the point of needing to act. So let's talk about what hearing loss is just a little bit. Talk about some of the anatomy and the physiology just very, very briefly. So hearing loss 101. The ear is basically composed of 3 different parts. There's the outer ear, here, sort of the part that we can see on the outside. We've got the middle ear, which consists of a few different parts. There's some nerves, there's some fluid, there's our eardrum, that all of these parts, and then some bones, the incus and the malleus and the stapes, all of these parts of the ear work together basically to change or convert energy, sound energy, into electrical energy, and push that electrical energy into the cochlea, which is the inner ear. And the cochlea then converts it down even to a finer electric energy, and it becomes a nerve impulse, and that's how our brain perceives what we hear. So the primary causes of hearing loss all have to do with the anatomy of the ear. Typically, loud noise is a major factor. Individuals that worked in a factory, that have been military, that have shot large guns, cannons, things of that nature, or worked in an airfield around airplanes. Just loud noise, constant exposure to loud noise, anything over 80 decibels. If you have exposure of more than a couple of hours a day, you can guarantee that hearing loss is going to be present at some point. Aging. The parts of the ear just start to break down. Just like the rest of our body, things just don't work like they used to. Another issue is virus or infection. Smallpox, scarlet fever, some of these polio, some of these diseases that we dealt with such a long time ago in the United States can cause hearing loss. Even just fevers, infections can do that even today. Trauma, head trauma is a huge one. I mean, you can see just the fine, minute nature of how the ear works. I mean, the pieces and the components are so small that anything gets knocked out of whack, it can really cause damage to the whole hearing function of the ear. Earwax. Now, this is a big one. People don't necessarily think of this as it pertains to typical hearing loss, but earwax is a big one. Sometimes there can just be a buildup or an impaction of earwax in the ear canal, and it sort of butts up against the eardrum. And if the eardrum is blocked in any way from receiving that impulse or the sound waves from the outside of the ear, then there's going to be a perceived hearing loss. And then some medications as well. I mean, they're very strong antibiotics, typically chemotherapy type medications as well can definitely cause hearing loss. Now, symptoms. I think a lot of us are very, very aware of what some of the symptoms are. Maybe there's a few that might jump up and surprise you, but people will seem to mumble. Maybe your loved ones or the individuals you take care of will say, "You're mumbling, speak up." They may ask you to repeat yourself. Telephone conversations are very difficult. Any electronic medium like TV or radio is going to be very, very difficult. Maybe you might tell somebody that they're speaking too loudly. That's a very good indication that there may be a hearing loss. Now, ringing in the ears. Maybe if somebody's complaining of ringing in the ears, it's very interesting. This is a condition called tinnitus. And the ringing in the ears is a symptom of the same type of nerve damage that causes hearing loss. So if there is ringing in the ears, it's a very good chance that the patient or the individual will also be experiencing some form of hearing loss. One of the initial complaints that we always hear is individuals will have difficulty hearing in the presence of background noise or in crowds. This is something that's very common. When the environmental noise gets to a point where it starts to bleed over the top of a regular one-on-one conversation, a person with normal hearing should be able to filter that background noise out and hear the one-on-one conversation. If that's not happening, again, very good indication that there is hearing loss present. So methods of treatment. Let's talk about the two types of hearing loss that are out there. There's a sensory neural hearing loss. In other words, this is a nerve hearing loss. So there's damage to the cochlea or there's damage to the nerves that process the electrical energy to the brain. So basically it's a portion of the sound is not making it to the brain. The best way that we can treat this is with amplification. In other words, hearing aids or assistive listening devices like amplified telephones, amplified systems for your television, things of that nature. But hearing aids are typically the go-to at this point. Now, a conductive hearing loss may have a much simpler treatment, and that could be just removing the earwax like we talked about a minute ago. If we remove that earwax, a lot of times we see a dramatic improvement in the patient's hearing. So if you go for one of these free hearing exams, one of the first things the practitioner will do is look in the ear canal for an impaction of earwax. And if there's an impaction of earwax, most times the practitioner can remove that. If they can't, they may refer you out to a doctor's office if it's really bad, you might get referred out to a physician's office. There's also some medications that individuals can take to remove fluid or water that may be on the ear that could be causing hearing loss. There are some surgical components as well. Cochlear implants, BAHA or bone-anchored hearing aids are surgical procedures and products that are being used now to cochlear implant basically replaces a bad or damaged cochlea with a new cochlea that maps signals back to the brain. And a bone-anchored hearing aid does something very similar, but it focuses more on the bones rather than the nerves. So there are some surgical fixes available as well. Hearing aids, though, being definitely the most popular. Now let's talk about hearing aids for just a second. There, as I mentioned before, have been some tremendous advancements in hearing aid technology. I'm going to use my little pointer here and show you a couple things. About 5-6 years ago, this little hearing aid right here, or a completely in the canal hearing aid, was the go-to hearing aid. This was the most popular. It was the most expensive. It was also the smallest, and that's why it was so popular. Fit right down in the ear canal. It kind of solved that vanity issue that people had. If you were a candidate for this type of hearing aid, then this is what people would go with. And you can see that these other larger in the ear, this is a canal type of hearing aid, or a full shell or in the ear hearing aid here. These types of instruments are also in the ear, but a little bit more visible. Now, this type of instrument, behind the ear hearing aid, I think a lot of us have probably seen on family members or those that we take care of. This is for individuals with more of a severe to profound type of hearing loss. Very good, very, very capable instrument. It just does not necessarily solve that vanity issue. Now, this type of instrument here, this is what we call a receiver in the canal hearing aid. This portion back here is very, very small and fits right behind the outer ear, very invisible at first sight. And there's a small tube or a wire with the amplifier that goes right down inside the ear. So these types of hearing aids have just been amazing an amazing advancement in the last couple of years, because they're relatively invisible, they're extremely powerful, you can compensate for most types of hearing losses. Another nice thing is they have wireless capability, so you can connect them to a remote control. You can connect them over a Bluetooth connection to a cell phone. You can connect them over an FM connection to a television or a radio and have that signal broadcasted or streamed right to the individual's ear. So again, lots of different types of advancements in the field of hearing aids. Additionally, we have assistive listening devices. So new solutions for very specific types of uses. We have an FM system here called TV ears for television usage. We have amplified telephones, captioning telephones, personal amplifiers, things of that nature that allow us to have very specific amplification usage for very specific needs. Gary, this might be a good time for a poll.
Yeah, I think it's a great time for a poll. As a matter of fact, myself and my trustiest assistant, Vanna White, will walk us through this upcoming poll. I think that it makes a lot of sense for us as caregivers and professional caregivers to do a poll like this. Does your loved one client use any of the following? Please select all that apply. 1 hearing aid, 2 hearing aids, some form of assisted living device, amplifier, booster, cochlear device, or nothing. So go ahead and plug in your responses, and let's see what we all think. Wow, this is going fast. It's great. Everyone absolutely has great opinions on this. Vanna?
All right, let's go ahead and close that up. So if you haven't voted, do so right now. Let's take a look.
Very interesting. Nothing, 48%, which makes sense for you to be here because this is the expert to be talking to. Two hearing aids, 38%, which I find, Jim, I find that very, very interesting.
Yeah, out of the individuals that wear hearing aids, we usually see a higher rate that wear two rather than one.
And some form of assisted listening device or amplifier booster like the ones we had just seen. That is amazing. Thank you, everybody, for responding to that poll.
I think one of the big issues there is that over 50% of individuals, or almost 50% of individuals, have done nothing. So again, it speaks to what we've talked about and how people will delay or not do anything. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So communicating by telephone is a specific area that I think we should spend a couple of minutes talking about. I mean, we can see here this keyboard kind of represents the full spectrum of sound or normal hearing here. This little bar up here represents a normal telephone signal even with somebody with normal hearing. So you can see that the hearing on the telephone is just a very, very small part of even an individual with normal hearing. What that means is when our normal hearing is diminished, the telephone just becomes increasingly difficult to hear. The frequency range is just so small on a telephone. So telephone conversations are an area of extreme difficulty. So one of the solutions that is available is something that we call CTS, or Captioned Telephone Service. CTS is a program that's funded and regulated by the FCC. It's for individuals with hearing loss, and it's a part of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So the FCC basically gives people with hearing loss access to this captioned telephone service at no cost. It's a fantastic service. One solution that's a part of the CTS function is Caption Call. And Caption Call is the name of the organization. It's the name of the product. It's the name of the service. Caption Call is also a part of Sorensen Communications, who is also the worldwide leader in telecommunication relay services for the deaf. So video relay and hard of hearing service, telephone services for the hard of hearing and the deaf. Caption Call we make our own product, and we're an authorized provider of the caption telephone service that the FCC offers. So the idea is that we provide a phone for anyone that has trouble hearing. The nice thing is not only is it an amplified telephone, but it also provides captions of what callers are saying. So not only can the individual with hearing loss hear an amplified call, but they can also read on a very sleek, very sort of flat panel screen, very, very beautiful phone, what is being said on the other end of the phone call. Again, great sound quality. You can customize the sound to match your hearing loss, and you can also customize the size of the captions to be able to see what's being said. How does it all work? The idea also is that we want to provide quick captions so you're not lagging behind. So we have call centers all over the country where people are basically handling these calls and very quick to provide just almost no latency or delay in the captioning on the phone call. So individual with hearing loss picks up the phone, makes a regular phone call, just a regular phone, and is able to see the text of the other person on the other end of the phone call in real time. It happens all very quickly and very beautifully, I might add. There's some really good news as well. It's free. So free captioning service from the FCC. And Caption Call, we make the phone available to individuals with hearing loss and individuals who are receiving care from a caregiver. Anybody in that particular group, completely at no charge. We also provide free delivery, free installation, free ongoing customer support, free. There's no bill, there's no hidden cost. Again, this is just something that is provided by the Federal Communications Commission of the United States. So again, of course, this is a question we get quite often. How can it be free? The idea is that you've got to have hearing loss to participate. And the Interstate Telecommunications Relay Service Fund, this is just a small tax that we all pay on our phone bill. And that goes into a fund, and that fund is what actually pays for the service. There's a couple of other items as well, requirements to participate. And that is you need a regular home phone line as well as a high-speed internet connection. And so if you've got those two things, the phone call is transmitted over the phone line, and the captions are provided to you over the internet line. So, in conclusion, I wanted to just talk about my love for the hearing impaired. I think this is a phenomenal audience and a phenomenal place to be, and phenomenal people to talk with and help. I've been in this industry for a while, and there's never a bad time to take action. I hope that you've been able to see that there are many tools available to help. And in addition to that, hearing healthcare or hearing help has never been better for individuals to hear on the telephone. So talking with your friends, talking with your loved ones if you have hearing aids just got much easier. And it's been an absolute honor to have this conversation today and to talk about these things. And again, thank you for allowing me to do it. And I thought I'd just pass it back over to Gary, and we'll let him take it from here.
Don't go anywhere, because I know there's a ton of questions in the queue for you. So stay around, because no one wants me to answer these questions.
Happy to do it.
Yeah. Okay, Vanna, are you online?
I sure am.
Okay, let's do this final poll before we get to the questions, which I know everyone's looking forward to. What are your next steps in helping your loved one, client get the hearing support they need? Select all that apply. Make it a family priority. Stop enabling them. Share the information from today's webinar to help educate. Talk about safety. Other. And we'll wait to, okay, this, you'll be very surprised, happily surprised at the talk about safety. I feel like I'm watching a horse race.
They are coming in fast.
I know, it's great.
All right, folks. Well, if you haven't voted, go ahead and do so. We'll be closing it up right now.
Okay, Vanna, let's spin the wheel. Look at that. Number 1, share the information from today's webinar to help educate. Thank you, Jim. Number 2, talk about safety. I am so glad that's in one of the first 2. 3 is make it a family priority. Absolutely. Stop enabling them. And then other. So thank you, everybody. Let's take a moment and get some questions to Jim. Actually, take a moment for me to organize these questions. They are really coming in fast and furious, but I'm very excited about that. Are you ready, Jim?
I'm ready.
Okay, let's go. Hey, this is from Patricia from Oxnard. She says, hey, Jim, what role does an audiologist play? Shouldn't I send my mom to our regular doctor?
That's a very good question. There's a couple places you can start. An audiologist usually will have their own clinic. So you can look around for audiology clinics in the phone book or online or whatever resources you have. A regular doctor probably isn't the best place to start. You can also start with a hearing instrument specialist. So audiologists and hearing instrument specialists are going to have their own standalone clinics and can take their own appointments. Sometimes there are audiologists that will work for an ear, nose, and throat doctor, but there's no physician or doctor that is really going to perform a hearing test. They would refer out to an audiologist or a hearing instrument specialist.
Okay, excellent. Mike from Sacramento asks, Jim, what's the catch with the phone? How can it be free? And what do you have to do to qualify for the free phone? Sorry, Mike, only one question. No, I'm kidding.
Very good questions. We get these questions a lot. Again, if you've got hearing loss, you automatically qualify under the provisions of the FCC for usage not only of the phone, but of the captioning service as well. So we are all paying for the service every month on our phone bill, on our cell phone bill. We are putting a few cents every month into this fund, and then that fund grows and then provides this provision for the hard of hearing. That's why it's free.
Excellent. Well, another one came in along the same line, so let me throw that at you. Cindy from Fort Lauderdale. The phone looks wonderful, but I'm afraid the technology, this is a great question, or a great thing to answer. I'm afraid the technology would intimidate my mother-in-law. What do you do about that?
Very good question. The bottom line, it's just a phone. It works and functions exactly like any phone that you would just pick up and use. We, Caption Call, do the rest. We install it, we set up the captioning, we set up the amplification. So all of that is done by one of our professional installers or trainers. And once the phone is done and installed and set up and ready, you pick it up and you dial just like any other phone.
Excellent. Well, I think we got some more if you're going to stick around.
I'm here.
Okay. Here's one from Mark. I'm going to say Mark from Michigan because I don't know where Mark is calling from. It could be Muskogee. My mom gets angry when I address her hearing loss, particularly on the phone, and claims it's a cell phone. That's when I call from a landline, it's better. She says it's those damn cell phones. It's not just my hearing. What do I say to that? That would be helpful.
Wow, it's a very common scenario, and we see it a lot. I mean, cell phones can get blamed, and then once the landline is picked up, there's really no improvement in the conversation. This is one of those times where being on the phone call, and when you're on the phone call, it's probably not the best time to talk about it because mom is probably feeling very self-conscious and very self-aware at that particular moment. But in a quiet moment, maybe when you're together or even on a different phone call, when that hasn't necessarily come up, it's time to just say, Mom, I've noticed that maybe you're not hearing as well on the phone, and I don't think it's necessarily the cell phone. You're having the same difficulty on the landline, or find some way to phrase it that just says, I'm noticing the difficulty regardless of what type of phone we're on. And again, it's a tough conversation, but say, Mom, I'm really just telling you this because, hey, I love you, and I want to make sure you're hearing me and the kids and the wife and everybody on the phone.
Oh, okay. Maureen wants to know if Caption Call is available in Canada.
Great question. It is not available in Canada because it's the Federal Communications Commission of the United States. We are only captioning in the United States and the United States territories.
That's a good reason for the Canadian caregivers to be talking to their government about doing things like this. This is a great service.
And I think there are some CTS providers in Canada, and it might just be worth a little bit of research on that end.
Okay. Brett from New York City. My mom has hearing aids but doesn't use them. What might be the reason, and what can we do to help?
I like this question because this is something that I used to deal with on a day-to-day basis in my clinics. The number one thing you can do is participate in your annual, quarterly, monthly service appointments with your hearing aid provider. There is some reason that this particular person is not wearing their hearing aids. Maybe they don't fit well. Maybe there's an issue with dexterity. Maybe that she can't get the hearing aids in her ears right. Maybe they just don't sound like she wants them. Hearing aids now are digital. They can be adjusted. They can be set for different types of hearing loss. There's so many different types of adjustments and modifications that can be made. It's worth just going in, making an appointment, and talking it over with your hearing aid provider.
Excellent. Thank you. This is from Mark, also in New York City. I hope you guys stay safe up there for this weekend. Is the transcription from Caption Call operator assisted or computer assisted?
Great question. It's actually both. With Caption Call, we have call centers all over the country, and what happens is we also use a voice recognition software. But in order to have the phone calls transcripted and captioned exactly, we have an individual revoice the one end of the phone call. So the individual who's being captioned, we have somebody that we call a call assistant revoicing that call into voice recognition software, and it's transcribed over high-speed internet. And the FCC requires, the way that we refer to it is that call assistant is basically the dial tone. So it's a very secure environment, and it's highly regulated. So we actually use both.
Okay, here is, well, Angela, I can answer this. How do you contact Caption Call? That should be on your screen right now. And I want to thank Linda because she just wrote a note that said, great, this is great, thanks. Let's see. This is from Jane. I work in a hospital. Is it possible to get one of these phones for patient use or education?
That's a great question. It's interesting. My mom works in a hospital as well, and she just asked me the same question. And if you've got patients that are coming in and you reserve the phone for use for hearing loss, for patients with hearing loss, then yes, you can absolutely have them use it for their use and for educational purposes. Absolutely.
I don't know if I asked this. Stop me if I ask this. This is how do I get my mom to accept the fact she might have hearing problems?
You know, let's take this as a way to have a first conversation. You know, maybe we addressed the other one where the individual had a mother-in-law and there's kind of an ongoing issue. But if you're just starting to notice that mom has got a hearing problem, one thing that I usually say to people is it's never a bad idea to go in, just get a hearing test and get a baseline. Find out where you're at, and you can have it rechecked every year or every couple of years just to see if things change. Now that way, if you go in and you realize the hearing problem is much worse than you thought, then yeah, it's time to take action. Maybe the hearing loss isn't so bad. Maybe and it's a pleasant surprise. But just saying, let's go in and let's get a baseline check. Let's have just a quick hearing test and see where we're at. That usually is not offensive to people, and people usually are okay with that.
Terrific. Let me get a little technical in here. This is from Angie. Angela, I don't want to be too familiar here. Is there a research towards surgical correction of hearing loss related to nerve damage? If so, how successful are these?
Fantastic question. There is a tremendous amount of ongoing research pertaining to surgical correction. The major solutions that we have right now are cochlear implants and bone-anchored hearing aids, or a BAHA is another way to put that. But again, with the ongoing research, there are also thresholds. So you've got to fall into a certain category to be able to take advantage of this type of procedure. And those vary from doctor to doctor, but they're all very similar in that cochlear implant, you basically have to have a completely, basically a decimated cochlea that is not working at all. If you have any response in your cochlea at all, then you're really looking at more of a hearing aid. That's the way that the research is pointing us now. And you can receive 2 cochlear implants. You can receive a cochlear implant for both ears. Now, let's say you've got single-sided deafness, where one ear is not hearing and you have another ear that is. Typically, that's going to be a bone conduction problem. And so that's where a bone-anchored hearing aid would come into play more so than a cochlear implant. But the research is showing us that cochlear implants are getting better, and that nerve damage far surpasses bone damage as the #1 cause of hearing loss.
That's terrific. Any final words, Jim? Because I know we're running out of time, and not that we ran out of questions. I kind of doubled up on some. A lot of people asked similar questions. A final moment for final 30 seconds?
Yeah, final thought is this. Having a hearing loss is one thing, but doing nothing about it is an entirely different set of circumstances. So the challenge of hearing loss by itself is huge. The challenge of having hearing loss, knowing about it and not doing something, is gargantuan. So just, if there's one thing you take away from this, just do something. Just take a step. Don't try to solve it in one step, but just take a step.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. And let me throw it back to Vanna or Lori. And thank you for your tremendous team for putting this together. We appreciate all you did.
Absolutely. And folks, we're at just about at that time, and want to thank each of you for joining us today, and hope you found today's webinar of value and that you'll want to join us for some future events. As I mentioned, you will be receiving a short survey at the end of the webinar, so we certainly would appreciate you taking just a moment to fill it out. Additionally, for any questions that we couldn't answer on air today, we promise we'll get you answers as soon as possible via email. As I mentioned, a copy of today's recorded webcast will be made available as an on-demand viewing, and so you'll each be receiving an email with a link in order to access this recording, and look out for it by the middle of next week. Special thanks again to our sponsors and our speaker, as well as our behind-the-scenes logistics producer, Patty Van Hooser, for making today possible. And again, as your co-moderator here, Lori Dearman, saying thank you and have a great rest of the week. Goodbye for now.